The third call from an unknown number should have gone straight to voicemail, like the others. But for some reason, maybe curiosity, maybe boredom, I picked up. And then I heard it. My wife, breathless, panicked, whispering into the phone like she was hiding from a bomb squad. "There's moving vans outside. Men. Lots of them. Loading our furniture." I leaned back in my creaky office chair, eyes flicking to the clock on my laptop. 2:47 p.m. A Tuesday, exactly 3 days into what had been the quietest stretch of my life in years. I said, "Why didn't you tell me we were moving?" Her voice cracked, trembling. "Why haven't you been answering your phone?" I let the silence hang like a thick London fog. "I think you've got the wrong number." "What?" "No, it's me. I'm calling from a mate's phone because mine's dead." Her voice was shaking harder now. "You might want to check whose house that actually is." I hung up before she could say more. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Again and again. I sent them all to voicemail and forced a small, almost guilty smile. 3 days. 72 hours of blessed silence. No texts at 9 a.m. asking where I was having my sandwich. No frantic calls at 2 p.m. demanding to know who that woman was in the cafe behind me on Zoom. No constant tracking disguised as concern, as if my phone's GPS was some electronic leash she needed to hold tight. For 3 days, I had eaten a sandwich without photographing it for proof I wasn't with a female colleague. I stayed late at the office without interrogations about why. I went to the gym without a follow-up call. 3 days of breathing room, and I hadn't even realized I'd been suffocating. The first day, I'd been cautiously optimistic. Maybe she was just busy. Maybe the book club was having an event. I even felt a small flutter of worry come dinner time, but old habits die hard. 7 years of marriage don't just vanish overnight. By day 2, the worry faded into something clearer. Relief. I slept better that night than I had in half a year. Number 3 a.m. wake-up calls asking who I dreamed about. No phone checks while she was asleep. By day 3, I understood. This wasn't just a busy week. This was the challenge she'd mentioned at dinner 5 days ago. She'd been scrolling through her phone, barely looking up, that familiar smirk curling her lips, the one that made her look like a teenager plotting mischief with her mates. "The girls have this idea," she'd said. "A little social experiment." I'd raised an eyebrow. "Do tell." "Delete his number for a week," she said. "See if he even notices you're gone. If he really loves you, he'll find a way to reach out. It proves whether he actually values you or just takes you for granted." I just nodded and kept eating. 7 years of marriage training me to choose silence. Her friends had been running these experiments for months. One stopped cooking for 2 weeks to see if her boyfriend would step up or let them starve. Another ignored morning texts to see how long it'd take before her partner noticed. A third withheld physical affection to reset the power balance. Every story she told me was laced with admiration. Like these women had cracked some secret code about relationships. Like I was the clueless one. She was stockpiling these stories like ammo, waiting to launch her own test. And I'd been the unwitting target. The irony? She'd never asked about the house. Never questioned the mortgage or property taxes. It was in my name alone, bought 3 years before we married. Yet she assumed ownership because we lived there together. The eviction papers had been filed on day 1 of her challenge. The day she deleted my number and bragged to her friends. While she was laughing in the group chat, I was signing legal documents with my solicitor. The phone rang again. 4th call. "Property owner?" I answered flatly. Her voice was frantic. "The movers won't talk to me. They said to contact the landlord." "Is this some kind of joke? Are you punishing me? The neighbors are watching. How do I stop this?" I kept my tone polite, almost friendly. "Stop it. This isn't funny. If you're looking for the previous tenant, they moved out. The lease wasn't renewed. Contact your landlord for forwarding details." I hung up. I looked out the window, the gray skies over Hampstead barely lifting. I didn't know if I'd ever see her again, but I knew one thing for certain: wrong number, wrong house, wrong wife, and for the first time in years, the right decision. I stared out the rain-speckled window of my flat in Hampstead. The city's usual gray washed even duller by the weight settling in my chest. The moving vans had come and gone, like some surreal slapstick routine. Except this wasn't comedy. It was the end of a 7-year marriage, played out in 3 days of silence and a few phone calls that felt colder than the British winter. I thought back to that dinner, just days before all this chaos. Emily, my wife, had barely looked up from her phone as she described the latest challenge from her friends. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose bun that evening, strands escaping to frame her face in a way that made her look both vulnerable and mischievous. She wore that silk blouse I'd bought her last Christmas, the emerald green one that caught the light just right, and a pair of tailored black trousers that hugged her slender legs. Her shoes clicked softly against the hardwood floor, heels just high enough to give her that confident stride I always admired. But that night, the sparkle in her eyes wasn't for me. It was for the game she was about to play. "Delete my number for a week," she'd said, voice low, almost teasing. "See if you even notice." I remember thinking it was ridiculous, a childish stunt. But beneath the surface, a cold knot of dread settled in my stomach. I never did get to confront her that night. She was already halfway out the door, phone in hand, fingers dancing across the screen like a magician weaving spells. The following days were a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I didn't chase her. I didn't panic. Instead, I focused on work, drowning myself in spreadsheets and emails, pretending the silence wasn't screaming in my ears. And yet, every time the phone buzzed with that unknown number, my heart skipped. I recall the first call. I'd been at my desk in Camden, the rain tapping rhythmically against the window. I glanced at the screen, hesitation rooting me to the spot. Then I answered. "Are you moving out on me?" Her voice was thin, brittle. "No," I said, trying to keep the edge of sarcasm out. "Why would I?" "Because there are men at the door, packing up our things." I could almost see her then, Emily, standing barefoot on the aged wooden floor, clutching a borrowed phone like a lifeline. Her soft cotton dress had probably been crisp and white that morning, but now it clung to her skin, crumpled and stained with tears. The delicate silver necklace I'd given her for our anniversary glinted dully in the afternoon light. She was terrified, and I was calm. I sighed, rubbed the back of my neck, and said, "Check again. That's not our house anymore." There was silence, heavy and suffocating. Then the calls kept coming, the desperation rising in her voice with each ring. But I stayed firm. I wasn't going to play her game. Sure, it felt cruel, but sometimes cruelty is the only way to wake someone up. Later that evening, I made the calls I needed to make. The solicitor who'd handled the purchase of the house, the removal company, Top Gear Movers ironically enough, and a storage facility on the outskirts of town, tucked away in a nondescript industrial park near Watford. Each call was clinical and deliberate, a stark contrast to the chaos that was unraveling. I remember the moving company rep's bemused tone when I booked the date. "Blimey, sir, you're getting this sorted quick. Usually it's months of back and forth. You sure you want to do this?" I chuckled dryly. No time like the present. The irony wasn't lost on me. When the eviction notice was filed, it was all perfectly legal, clean, documented, and, frankly, long overdue. But what struck me the most was how little she'd understood about our life together. The house, the mortgage, the bills, all in my name. She'd never asked, never cared. She assumed marriage meant shared everything, but that was a fantasy. The reality was far more complicated. And in the end, she chose to play games with our future instead of talking to me. The night before the movers arrived, I sat alone in the dark, nursing a whiskey that tasted bitter and hollow. I wondered if she'd realize what she'd lost before the last box was loaded. Would she call? Apologize? Or would she keep hiding behind her friends and their toxic little challenges? I didn't know. What I did know was this. Sometimes, love isn't about chasing. Sometimes it's about walking away. And as I watched the rain blur the city lights, I felt the first real flicker of freedom. But just as I was about to pour myself another drink, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I stared at it, hesitated. Then, with a cold certainty, I let it ring out. Because some calls aren't meant to be answered. That morning, I found myself wandering through the bustling streets of Islington, the chill air biting at my cheeks as I tried to shake the heaviness clinging to me. The city was waking up, shopkeepers flipping open shutters, the aroma of freshly baked pastries wafting from corner cafes, commuters hustling by with their oversized umbrellas and rushed expressions. Life went on, indifferent to the wreckage of my marriage. I ducked into a small coffee shop, the Brew House, tucked between a second-hand bookshop and a vintage record store. The place was cozy, the kind of spot where the barista knew your name, or at least your usual order, and the walls were plastered with black and white photos of London's past. I ordered a flat white and took a seat by the fogged-up window, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. Then she walked in. Emily. Her presence was a jarring splash of color against the muted grays of the morning. She wore a burgundy trench coat, cinched tightly at the waist, the collar turned up against the drizzle. Her dark hair was loose this time, cascading in waves that caught the soft light, framing a face streaked with the remnants of last night's tears. The mascara was smudged, lending her a raw vulnerability that was both heartbreaking and, I'll admit, a little captivating. She spotted me almost immediately, hesitating before sliding into the chair opposite without a word. Her fingers nervously twisted the silver charm bracelet I'd given her years ago, a delicate thing, now seeming almost fragile. "Thanks for meeting me," she whispered, voice hoarse. I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. "Let's be clear. I'm here to talk terms, not to patch things up." Her eyes welled again, but she blinked them back fiercely. "I was insecure," she began, voice trembling. "I felt like you didn't see me anymore. So instead of talking, I let them convince me to test you." I raised an eyebrow. "Test me?" She swallowed hard. "The group, my friends, they said it was about empowerment, about knowing my worth. But it became this game." I leaned forward. "There's a difference between seeking reassurance and trying to control someone." She looked down, ashamed. "You thought I took you for granted," I continued. "Did you ever tell me? Really tell me? Or did you just set traps?" Her hands clenched the bracelet tighter. "I should have talked to you." "Exactly. But you didn't. Instead, you surrounded yourself with people who told you manipulation was self-care." She looked up, eyes wide. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I said softly. "And the worst part? You weaponized my love, my fear." Her voice barely a whisper. "I know now." Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle, the city's noise fading to a murmur. For a moment, we were just two people caught between love and loss, the space between us thick with words unspoken. I stood, leaving a few pounds on the table for the coffees. "You had 7 years to show me I mattered. Instead, you chose a game over us." She bit her lip, fighting tears. "I love you." I shook my head. "Love isn't a feeling you use when it suits you. It's a choice you make every day." As I walked out, the bell above the door jingled softly behind me. I glanced back once. Her sitting there, alone, the weight of what she'd done settling in like the London fog. And somewhere in the quiet, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Not yet. Later that week, I found myself back in my new flat in Camden, the stark white walls echoing the emptiness I felt inside. The place was smaller, more modest, but it was mine, finally. No illusions, no shared ownership, just a space I could call my own. I'd traded in 7 years of marriage for a fresh start, and the silence, though heavy, felt like a strange kind of freedom. The evening light filtered through the blinds as I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through emails from my solicitor. One subject caught my eye: storage unit details and access information. I clicked it open. There it was, an address for a unit tucked away in an industrial estate near Watford. The place sounded dull, but it held the remnants of a life that felt increasingly like a fading photograph. Curiosity gnawed at me. I decided to visit. The next morning, rain pattered against the windshield as I drove through the winding roads of Hertfordshire, the sky a dull slate. When I arrived, the storage facility was exactly as unremarkable as I'd imagined. Gray metal doors lined up like soldiers at attention, the faint hum of a security gate in the background. I punched in the code, the door creaking open to reveal a dimly lit space filled with cardboard boxes and furniture covered in dusty sheets. I walked inside, the air thick with the scent of old wood and packing tape. Among the boxes, I spotted her things. Carefully packed jewelry boxes, a pair of high-heeled shoes with faint scuff marks on the soles, a silk scarf in deep crimson draped over a chair. The scarf caught the light just right, hinting at the woman I'd once known. Confident, stylish, and, yes, a little dangerous. I picked up a framed photo from one of the boxes. A snapshot of us on our wedding day, smiling beneath a pale London sky. The memory hit me like a punch to the gut. As I set the frame down, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I silenced it. Turning back to the boxes, I found a small leather-bound journal tucked beneath a pile of clothes. Flipping it open, I saw her handwriting, curvy, deliberate, the kind of script that made even the simplest words feel intimate. I hesitated, then began to read. The pages were filled with her thoughts, confessions, and fears. The insecurity that had driven her to those toxic challenges with her friends. The loneliness she'd masked behind smirks and games. The desperate hope that I'd notice, that I'd care. One entry caught my eye. Asterisk. I don't know who I am anymore without them. Without the group. But I'm scared to be alone. With myself, with him, with the silence. Asterisk. I closed the journal, heart heavy. Maybe this wasn't just about control or manipulation. Maybe it was about two people lost in their own worlds, unable to bridge the growing chasm. But as I turned to leave, my phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time I answered. A voice, shaky and almost pleading, whispered, "Can we talk?" I hesitated, then said, "I'm listening." And just like that, the game wasn't over. It had only just begun. Her voice trembled through the line, fragile like a glass about to shatter. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. I thought it was just a test, a way to make things better. But I was wrong. So wrong. I leaned against the cold brick wall outside the storage unit, the drizzle turning into a steady rain, soaking through my coat. The city's distant hum felt muted, like I was trapped inside a bubble of tension and regret. "Emily," I said slowly, "tests don't build trust. They break it. You made a choice, and now we're living with the consequences." She sighed, the sound carrying years of exhaustion. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out who I am without them, without the group that told me to play games instead of being honest." I ran a hand through my hair, the rain mixing with sweat and frustration. "You surrounded yourself with people who encouraged manipulation. That's not empowerment. It's control disguised as self-worth." A pause. Then, "I don't know how to fix this," she admitted. "But I want to try." I looked down at the journal still clutched in my hand, the words echoing in my mind. "It'll take more than words, Emily. You need to show it. Cut ties with that group. Face the truth, even when it hurts." Her voice wavered. "I'm scared." "Good," I said. "Fear means you care. But fear alone isn't enough." The line went quiet for a moment before she whispered, "Thank you for listening." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning." We hung up, and I stared at the gray sky, wondering if the storm inside us could ever clear. That night, I dreamt of the moving vans again. The men loading boxes as shadows whispered secrets I couldn't quite hear. When I woke, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. But this time I didn't hesitate. I answered. "Can you meet me?" Her voice was desperate, pleading. I agreed. And so, under the cold glow of street lamps in a quiet London park, two fractured souls prepared to confront the wreckage of their past and the uncertain path ahead. But as we spoke, a message popped up on my phone. "We're watching. Don't trust him." The message was unsigned, but the threat was clear. Someone else was still playing games. And this time, the stakes were higher than ever. The park was nearly empty, save for the occasional rustle of leaves caught by a chilly breeze. The benches were slick with rain, and the dim glow of the street lamps cast long shadows that danced like ghosts in the mist. I spotted Emily before she saw me. Her silhouette wrapped in that burgundy trench coat, shoulders hunched as if carrying the weight of the world. She looked up, eyes wide and haunted, mascara smudged beneath them. Her delicate fingers nervously twisted the silver charm bracelet I'd once given her, the same one from the cafe. The air between us was thick with unspoken apologies and fractured hopes. "It's not just us anymore," she whispered, voice trembling. "They're still watching. The group. Someone sent me that message." I pulled my coat tighter around me, trying to shield us from the cold, and from whatever unseen eyes lurked in the shadows. "Who do you think it is?" She shook her head, biting her lip. "I don't know, but it feels like they want to keep controlling every move, every word." I glanced around the empty park, the silence heavy enough to hear our breathing. "Sounds like you've got ghosts in your past, and some of them aren't ready to let go." She met my gaze, raw and vulnerable. "I want to break free. From them, from the games, from myself. But it's like they have this grip on me." I sighed, stepping closer. "You can't fight shadows alone. If we're going to fix this, we need to find the light." Her lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but then her phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen, eyes darkening. Another message. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Whoever was behind this wasn't just a concerned friend. They were a puppeteer pulling strings in the dark. "I want to trust you," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm scared they'll drag me back." I reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Then let me be the reason you don't have to." For a fleeting moment, hope flickered between us. But as we stood there, the distant wail of sirens echoed through the night, and I knew the real game was far from over. Because sometimes, the biggest betrayals aren't the ones you see coming. They're the ones whispered in the shadows, waiting to strike when you least expect it. The morning sun broke through the heavy London fog like a reluctant spotlight, casting pale light over the narrow streets of Camden Town. I sat at the kitchen table of my modest flat, the smell of strong black coffee mingling with the faint scent of damp leather from my worn jacket. The conversation with Emily in the park replayed in my mind, every word weighted with unspoken fears and fragile promises. My phone vibrated sharply, jolting me from the spiral of thoughts. Unknown number. Again. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen. But this time, curiosity and dread won out. I answered. "Listen carefully." A cold, unfamiliar voice whispered, distorted as if through a cracked speaker. "Stop digging, or you'll lose more than you bargained for." The line went dead before I could respond. I slammed the phone down, heart pounding like a drum in a war march. Whoever was behind this wasn't just playing games, they wanted to control the board. I needed allies, not just in Emily, but somewhere I could find truth, strength, and maybe, just maybe, a way out. I thought of my old university friend, Mark. Sharp as a tack, a solicitor who'd always been the voice of reason in my chaotic world. And, yes, a part-time conspiracy theorist who'd once convinced me the pigeons in Trafalgar Square were government spies. But if anyone could help me untangle this mess, it was Mark. I dialed his number, the familiar ringtone a small comfort. "James? It's been a while," he answered, voice warm but edged with curiosity. "Mark, I need your help. It's about Emily, and a group of people who aren't just messing with her head. They're threatening both of us." There was a pause. Then, "Sounds serious. Meet me at the Crown Pub in Soho noon." I arrived early, the pub's dark wood and low lighting sheltering me from the chaos outside. Mark was already there, nursing a pint and wearing an expression that said he'd heard worse but wasn't impressed. I laid out the story, the challenges, the eviction, the group chat, the threats. His eyes narrowed as he listened. "This isn't just toxic friendships," he said finally. "This is manipulation at a higher level. Cult-like behavior, maybe?" I raised an eyebrow. "Cult?" He nodded. "Groups like this feed on control, fear, and secrecy. They isolate people, make them dependent. Once you're in, it's hard to leave." I swallowed hard. Emily's trapped in this. And I'm the enemy. Mark leaned in, voice low. "Then we need to find the leverage." evidence, messages, anything that shows what they're really up to. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through screenshots I'd saved, snippets of conversations, coded language about training partners, power plays, and winning at love. Mark whistled softly. This is gold. But it's also dangerous. Dangerous enough to keep me awake at night, I said. He clapped me on the shoulder. We'll get through this. But one thing's clear. You're not in this fight alone. As we talked, the weight on my chest lifted just a little. Maybe, just maybe, the game was changing. But outside, unnoticed, a shadow moved past the pub window, watching, waiting. Because in this city of secrets, trust was the rarest and most precious currency of all. That evening, the streets of Soho buzzed with neon lights and the hum of late-night chatter, a sharp contrast to the turmoil twisting inside me. After meeting Mark, I felt a flicker of hope, but also the heavy shadow of what lay ahead. The group Emily was tangled with wasn't just some silly clique. They were a well-oiled machine, and I was just a pawn who'd started asking too many questions. I decided to visit Emily's flat one last time before the eviction deadline. The building on Camden High Street was an aging Victorian pile with peeling paint and a creaky staircase that groaned underfoot. I climbed to the third floor, my footsteps echoing in the narrow hallway. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, the air was thick with silence and the faint scent of lavender, a fragrance she always wore when she wanted to feel in control. But control was the last thing she had now. Her belongings were half-packed, boxes stacked haphazardly beneath the window. On the worn wooden floor lay a pair of black stilettos, their slender heels scuffed and chipped, like the woman who once loved me, now fractured and raw. Emily sat on the edge of the sofa, her usual polished appearance replaced by an oversized gray jumper slipping off one shoulder, revealing a delicate collarbone dusted with freckles. Her jeans were faded and torn at the knees, and her bare feet curled beneath her, toes tapping nervously. Her dark hair cascaded in loose waves around her face, strands sticking to tear-streaked cheeks. A silver pendant hung low on a thin chain, catching the fading light. A small anchor, a symbol she'd picked during a trip to Brighton years ago. I hesitated before speaking. Emily. She looked up, eyes red but steady. James. We sat in the quiet, the weight of unspoken words pressing down. Finally, she broke the silence. They've been sending messages, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Threats. Warnings. They don't want me to break free. I reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. You're not alone. She swallowed hard. I'm scared. Not just of them, but of what comes next. If I leave, if I cut ties, everything changes. Who am I without them? I nodded, understanding more than she knew. It's terrifying. But sometimes, losing who you thought you were is the first step to finding who you really are. Her lips trembled, a flicker of vulnerability shining through the pain. I want to be free, she whispered, but I don't know if I have the strength. You do, I said firmly, and I'll be here to remind you when you forget. Outside, the city lights blurred through rain-streaked windows, casting long shadows that echoed the uncertainty ahead. As I left, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Asterisk. The game had changed, but the players were still lurking in the dark, ready to strike. And I was about to learn just how far they'd go to win. The days that followed were a blur of whispered conversations and sleepless nights. Emily and I plotted quietly, weaving a fragile alliance against a shadowy enemy whose reach seemed endless. Mark's legal expertise became our shield, while my determination morphed into a weapon sharper than any blade. One damp afternoon, we met in a cramped coffee shop tucked away in a side street near King's Cross. The air smelled of roasted beans and damp wool. Patrons hunched over laptops or lost in hushed talks. Emily sat across from me, her once confident posture now edged with cautious hope. She wore a soft cashmere sweater, sleeves pushed up to reveal slender wrists, and a pair of well-worn jeans that clung just right. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a stray curl brushing the curve of her neck. Mark slid into the seat beside us, eyes flicking to Emily with a mixture of concern and resolve. "We've got something," he said, voice low. "A leak. One of the women in that group is ready to talk. She's scared too. Says the whole thing's spiraling out of control." Emily's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yeah. But we have to move fast. They're watching all of us." Our plan took shape. A careful dance of gathering evidence, documenting threats, and preparing for whatever came next. Each step was a gamble, a delicate balance between exposing the truth and protecting ourselves. Late one night, as I sat alone in my flat, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "James," a voice whispered, barely audible. "You don't know what you're dealing with. Stop before it's too late." The line went dead. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The stakes were higher than I'd imagined. The next morning, Emily showed up at my door, determination etched into every line of her face. She held a worn envelope, trembling slightly. "I found this hidden in my things," she said. "Letters, photos, proof they've been spying on us." I took the envelope, flipping through its contents. Photos of us, notes on our routines, even recordings of phone calls. "This isn't just a game," I said grimly. "It's surveillance." Emily's voice cracked. "They want to control everything, even us." As we stood there, the weight of betrayal settling between us, a sudden knock shattered the fragile calm. I opened the door to find a police officer, badge gleaming under the hallway light. "We have a report of harassment and stalking linked to a group operating in the area," he said. "We're opening an investigation." Relief and fear collided inside me. The fight was far from over. But for the first time, we weren't alone. And as the door closed behind the officer, I knew one thing. The story was just beginning. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a storm. The police investigation brought a flicker of hope, but the shadows lurking in the corners of our lives refused to fade. Emily and I became a team forged in fire. Each day a battle to reclaim what was ours. Trust, freedom, and truth. One chilly evening, as the city lights blinked on beneath a sky heavy with rain, Emily and I met at a quiet riverside cafe in Richmond. The place was a refuge, its warm glow spilling onto cobblestone streets, the gentle murmur of the Thames nearby offering a rare sense of peace. She wore a deep navy coat, its tailored fit hugging her silhouette, and a scarf loosely wrapped around her neck. Her eyes, though still shadowed by recent turmoil, held a spark I hadn't seen in months. A fragile but fierce determination. We talked for hours, not just about the past and the betrayal, but about what lay ahead. About rebuilding, about healing, about the possibility of something real beyond the games. Yet beneath that hopeful conversation, a quiet tension lingered. Because even as the police moved forward, new messages began to trickle in. Cryptic notes, anonymous warnings, shadows of a threat that refused to die. One night, as I sat alone in my flat, my phone buzzed with a new text. Asterisk, you think it's over? You have no idea what's coming. Asterisk. I stared at the screen, the words burning into the silence. Emily's voice echoed in my mind. The woman I loved, lost, and maybe, just maybe, could find again. But the truth was clear. Our story wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. And somewhere in the dark corners of London, the players were still waiting. Waiting for the next move. The game was far from over. And the next chapter? Well, that's a story for another time.